Okay, so this is the plate part that is in the Engineering Design with Solidworks textbook that I use in my classroom. Uh, the page starts at 2-22 in the textbook. I don't follow the text exactly because I want to talk about some design intent and redoing this plate so that it follows good design practices in the engineering world. So we're going to start with new. We're going to do a part. Go OK. This part uses millimeters, so you want to double check that you're using metric, and we are. Okay. And we're going to start on the front plane, so I highlight the front plane and select new sketch. Okay, and in the book, the author uses a corner rectangle. I'm going to use a center rectangle. I want to make it coincident to the origin, and then we have the rubber band effect, boing, 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 and left click. And then I go right click and select to exit the command. All right, and then I want to add my dimensions. All right, that puts me over to page 2-27. I'm going to right click and notice I have a smart dimension tool here on my right click. That's a little bit faster than going all the way up to the ribbon. So I'm going to come over here. I left click here. This is going to be 56 in green check. And this here is going to be 22. And I'm going to go enter. Right. And then I'm going to come over to the features ribbon. I'm going to do boss extrude up to 10 and green check. And there are a couple options I'm going to want to change here. Real quick, I want to make sure that my sketch will auto rotate view normal to sketch plane. And I want to make sure my dimensions here are set to ANSI because I'm using ANSI. Okay, so I want everything to be ANSI standard because we're in America and Americans use ANSI standard. Okay, and then in my view, I like to set my view set to the arrow keys to 90. Okay, and then I'm going to say OK. All right, so we've got our block here, and I'm just holding down the wheel on my mouse to rotate. See that? Right, and then that takes me over to page 2-31. All right, and what she does is she just left click on the front face of the object, and notice that brings up all your dimensions. So you don't have to come in and edit the feature or edit the sketch in the browser. You can just click anywhere on the brick and then select the dimension you want to change. I want to change this 10 dimension to 5. Then I'm going to say enter. Notice that it updated. If it doesn't update for you, you can use this rebuild tool right here or Control B on your standard toolbar. Then I'm going to left click to release my selection, and notice it goes back to just a brick. Okay, and then in the book she does a little bit of review of shaded with edges, shaded, hidden lines visible, and wireframe. So you just kind of see the difference. All right. Now I'm on page 2-36 and 2-37 where she adds some holes. Now normally when I add holes, I'm only going to use the hole wizard, but in this case I'm going to use the sketch tool because the book does give you kind of a cool trick in terms of copying those circles. So I'm going to select this front face here for a sketch. So I highlight this face. I'm going to right click. I'm going to select the new sketch tool. There are two sketch tools. My students always get them confused. The top one is edit sketch, and what that would do is that would open up the brick so you could modify that rectangle we made. We don't want that one. What we want is the second row where we create a new sketch. So I'm going to go new sketch. Now the other thing is that now we've got the origin in the center of our brick. So we can use that to control where our holes are. In the book, the author dimensions from the edges. That's not good engineering practice, because if the width changes or the length changes, your holes can go off center. It also can create tolerance stacking issues, so we don't want to do that. We want to constrain our holes so that they're always going to be centered on the part, regardless of how wide it is or how long it is. And we want to control the dimensions between the two holes. So I'm going to select the circle tool up here. I'm just going to place a circle like this, boom. And then I'm going to right click and go select. That exits the command. I could also press the escape key in my on my keyboard. Now the next, what she does is kind of pat your head, rub your belly type of, let's see how good your hand-eye coordination is. So first step is you hold down the control key. So you're not going to see that on the screen. Next step is you select the circumference of the circle. And then you hold down your left mouse button and you drag the circle over to the right. Then release the mouse button, the left mouse button, and then you're going to release the control key. And then you're going to left click anywhere in your window, and notice you've created a copy of the circle. That's awesome. That's very cool. Now we want these circles to be equal, so we want to add a relation. There are a couple different ways to add a relation. I'm going to hold down the control key. I'm going to select the outside edge of this circle and the outside edge of this circle. Notice it brings up the properties. I've got the two arcs selected over here, and I'm going to say that I want them to be equal. Okay? And then I'm going to right click and clear the selections, and I'm going to say I want this center point, the origin, and this center point, and I'm holding down my control key here. So I've got this center point, this origin, and this center point all selected. And notice they're listed right here, and then I'm going to make them horizontal. Okay, so I've added my relations. Now it's time for me to add my dimensions. So the first dimension I'm going to add is the diameter, and I want it to be 4. Okay, and notice the symbol here is not showing up. That's a bug in Solidworks. That can get cleaned up. You can ignore it because we're just in a sketch. And then I want to add a dimension between the distance between the two circles. Well, she doesn't give that in the text, but luckily SolidWorks allows you to do math. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say equals 39.5 minus 16.5, and notice it did the math. And then I can green check. Okay, and I don't necessarily need that equal symbol. I could have just typed in, I'll exit out and I'll show you. You could do it without the equal symbol as well. You can select the 2 points, come up, and you want 39.5 minus 16.5, and notice it still gives you that dimension. And then I want to center them on that origin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the center point here, the origin here. I'm going to click to place that dimension. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backspace, okay, equals this dimension divided by 2. Okay, and then green check. And notice now it's got a sum here. It's centered the circles. Notice they're fully defined. Now what's cool about this is that if I change this value, notice this automatically updates. Okay, so that makes it easier for the part to maintain. It's going to ensure that your part's always in tolerance. And then I'm going to come over to features. I'm going to go extruded cut, and I want to do through all. And a student asked me the other day, why don't you just do to next or give it a depth? Well, 1 through all means that if I change this thickness at all, the holes will stay through all. And the second thing is that through all actually uses up less resources in your in SolidWorks, so it's going to save your file size and save your processing time. So I'm going to go green check, and then I've got the 2 holes, and I'm going to save this. I'm going to save it to my Laney folder, and I'm going to call it plate. Okay, and I'm going to save it. Okay, that takes me to the fillet. Okay, and I want to add a 1 millimeter fillet to all the edges. I don't want to add a fillet to this front face or the back face, because if I fillet the front or back face, that's going to fillet the holes. I don't want that. So I'm going to select fillet. I'm going to enable full preview here, and I'm going to change the value here to 1 millimeter. So it's 1 millimeter fillet. I'm going to put the preview on because then I can see it. If I select this face, notice it selects all the edges for that face. So I can just select the small or the thin sides, and that's going to fillet all apart. Notice that full preview helps me see what that fillet's going to look like. And then I'm going to green check. Done. Okay, and now it's time for our last feature. That's on page 2-43. I want to use the hole wizard now. So I'm going to select this face first, because then the hole wizard knows where I'm putting the hole. I'm going to select hole wizard right here on the features ribbon. And I want to select a metric hole. It's going to be a countersink hole, so I'm going to say countersink. Flathead, it's going to be M4. And it's going to be a through all, and make sure that you uncheck head clearance and uncheck far side countersink. Then we're going to go over to positions, and I'm just going to make it coincident to the origin. And once again, because I centered this on the origin, it makes it much easier for me to locate holes and position holes than if I had done that corner rectangle like it's done in the book. Then I'm going to green check, and I've got my plate completed. And usually at this point, I show my students where the appearances are, and I can come over and double click on an appearance I like. I just double left click, and that assigned an appearance to the part. Look how pretty that is. And that's, so that's how to make the plate in the textbook.